This is Ethan Griggs with another round of the 70s versus the 90s. This round we have Sidney Pollack's Bobby Deerfield versus Renny Harlin's Driven. Now, this is a tiebreaker episode. The 70s and 90s are currently tied 2-2, so it should be exciting to see who breaks the tie. First up, though, we have Bobby Deerfield, directed by Sidney Pollack and starring Al Pacino as the titular character Bobby Deerfield. And the character is an IndyCar driver. And for a movie about like IndyCar racing, it's got very little to do with racing. I mean, there's probably like out of a movie that's a little over 2 hours, there's probably two whole races in the film. Now, the first one is what sets up the whole film because one of Deerfield's teammates dies in a wreck and it really fucks him up. So like the whole movie is him dealing with his own mortality and wondering, could this be me? And he ends up, in the course of all his soul searching and trying to figure out what the fuck happened, he ends up falling in love with a woman that's terminally ill, and the movie centers more around their love story than they do any actual racing. And as far as like a race car driver, kind of a lame race car driver, very, internal, doesn't really act out very much, and can barely even like be intimate with women. The only way he can be intimate with a woman is, she has to be dying, and for somebody that doesn't give a fuck about death, he's very obsessed with death and can only respond to death. And, this is very much a 70s type movie, Sidney Pollack, not really an action director. The race scenes in this film are kind of mid, as granted, at this point in time, you're having to compete with, shit that came before, like John Frankenheimer's Grand Prix with James Garner and Le Mans with Steve McQueen. And so those films had better race sequences than they did dramatic acting. Now, this one, it relies so heavily on Pacino's performance, but it's not even that good of a Al Pacino performance. It's very, compared to his body of work in the 70s and even later on, it was very mid, and it could be that, this Sidney Pollack was better at directing guys like Robert Redford, where like they can just be movie stars and hit their mark, where it's like Pacino really needs a good script and a director that's going to allow him to go places that nobody would let him go. And, it's very safe picture, and the ending is what kills the movie for me because naturally the woman, she's terminally ill, she dies, and then they have a very very ambiguous even for the 70s. It was just fucking ridiculous because he just drives off and it flashes white and then it shows a picture of them together, so in a way it kind of alludes to the fact that he died, and that's fucking lame as shit. The dude's a race car driver. You could have killed him off so simply, even if you wanted to go all French New Wave and just have him drive off a fucking cliff. But having him die in a race right after this terminally ill woman died, that would have been a perfect movie. It would have been worth all the sad, slow, depressing shit. But instead you throw this fucking art house ending that's supposed to be fucking uplifting. It's just straight garbage. Ridiculous. But moving forward, then we have Renny Harlin's Driven. Now, Renny Harlin is a director that's made for this type of movie. This is, one of the greatest action directors of all time. He also did Deep Blue Sea, The Long Kiss Goodnight, Cliffhanger, which also has Stallone. Driven, and it has a better cast. Driven has, not only does it have Stallone, but, you've got Burt Reynolds, Till Schweiger, Gina Gershon. It's just a lot better put together of a movie because it matches the pace of the subject matter. For a movie about IndyCar racing, you don't want it to be slow. You don't want it putting you to sleep. In this one, there's hardly any dead air in the whole fucking movie. The movie's all fast moving, just like a fucking IndyCar race. The soundtrack is on point. The whole movie's designed to make sure that you don't fall asleep in the movie theater. And Stallone wrote the script too. And Stallone's really good at writing these types of movies. And one thing about it is Stallone doesn't get enough credit for is the dude knows how to stay in his lane. And he doesn't write himself a part that overshadows anybody, and everything all kind of fits together because they call him in to basically make this new kid great, to have the opportunity that he couldn't have, And so it's kind of a beautiful story you know, about people overcoming their bullshit and just doing what they love, which is what Bobby Deerfield could have been about if it had, you know, everybody not just so up their own ass on how fucking art house we can be with movies. If we can just make straight movies, then that would be great. So I would say the tie-breaking round goes to the 90s. Driven is way better. It's a way better of a movie. Now, granted, you can argue the ending is kind of corny, you know, but it's at least a fucking ending that is organic to the story, you know, and to the film, you know, and it makes sense, you know. I mean, Stallone loses, but he doesn't necessarily lose because everything happened the way that he wanted it to happen, you know, and he's not, you know, these guys are wild guys. They fucking ride rockets, you know, in the fucking rain and shit. You know, they're not gonna fucking sit around whining and brooding. They're gonna go like this, like the fucking kid he's so pissed off because the chick goes to the dude she was with before and he just drives the fucking car through the city. That's the kind of crazy shit these motherfuckers do. Not goddamn just fucking drive around Europe and brood, you know. I mean, that's all well and good if you want to make character studies, but if you're making sports films, you gotta be more true to the kinds of people that you're making movies about. That's why Driven wins this round, as well, because, like, honestly, Pacino was a shit casting choice for Bobby Deerfield, especially, you know, because much like Gene Hackman in The Conversation, yeah, these guys can do anything, but it doesn't necessarily mean they should. You know, there's certain roles that you want to see these guys in. You don't really want to see them play cucks. You want to see them be badass boss motherfuckers. And you don't get that. And the beauty of Stallone, though, is somebody that knows their lane, knows what they can do, and can put themselves in roles where they can age more gracefully, because they had no illusions to the fact that they can't act for shit. And so they make up for it by tailoring the script to themselves and knowing how to make other people look good. And then the race sequences in Driven are just fucking phenomenal, you know. A great combination of practical and you just tell some little computer generated effects, but it really kind of shows the intensity. It puts you right in there. You're there in the fucking race. And, you know, like I said, when you're making sports films, they need to be a little more exciting, you know, and that, you know, that you just gotta know your fucking lane. That's the biggest thing. And so that's 3-2 90s right now. So that should be interesting. The next round will be The Graduate versus Sex, Lies, and Videotape. So that should be even interesting too. And like I've said, if I've said anything wrong, something you disagree with, whatever the fuck, eviscerate me in the comments. I don't care. That's what the fucking internet's all about. You know, we're all just talking out of our asses. And like I said, this is a personal journey I gotta go on. I'm gonna figure it out which one was the better decade. Right now it's looking like the 90s, because even though it was on its own bullshit, it at least was aware of its bullshit. And some, you know, some of these, especially Bobby Deerfield, like The Conversation just put me to sleep, like watching fucking paint dry. You know, you had mid-script, mid-director, and a waste of a really good actor. Whereas like with Driven, all the pieces just come together to fit perfectly into a badass fucking high-octane movie. Because at the end, it's about fucking racing, you know? So let's make the fucking camera move, or let's make the fucking shit move, like Howard Hawks said. But anywho, 3-2, 90s. Next round, The Graduate versus Sex, Lies, and Videotape. So we'll see how it goes.